No being could experience so complex an emotion until advanced in his intellectual and moral faculties to at least a moderately high level. Nevertheless, we see some distant approach to this state of mind in the deep love of a dog for his master, associated with complete submission, some fear, and perhaps other feelings. End of citation. From here, the process of cultural evolution could take flight, leading to new entangled potentials, including many maladaptive errors into complex and finally monotheist mythologies. Darwin again. Citation. Many existing superstitions are the remnants of former false religious beliefs. The highest form of religion, the grand idea of God hating sin and loving righteousness, was unknown during primeval times. End of citation. Brain studies strongly support these emotional complements to cognitive modules. Meditations, worship services, prayers and recitations of religious texts are inducing complex spiritual and religious experiences. And Darwin proceeded by assuming that religiosity turned out to be adaptive by fostering in-group cooperation. According to him, the beliefs to be watched by relevant superempirical agents contributed to rule-abiding behaviors among the believers. Citation. He, the believer, must likewise avoid the reprobation of the one God, or gods, in whom according to his knowledge or superstition he may believe. But in this case the additional fear of divine punishment often supervenes. End of citation. In the last years, the purported effects of religious beliefs and even of conscious primings have been repeatedly observed in psychological experiments. According to Darwin, these cooperative potentials of religiosity led to cultural institutions emphasizing altruism and prosociality, and finally to the golden rule found in all world religions and main philosophies. Paraphrasing Jesus, Darwin assumed, citation, "To do good unto others, to do unto others as ye would they should do unto you, is the foundation stone of morality." End of citation. Recent studies in simulations and biomathematics seem to support this bold thesis. Without referring to Darwin's respective assumptions, Martin Nowak presented corresponding findings in his profound Super Cooperators. Although much remains to be explored, there is a growing consensus in the field about the primary evolutionary potential of religiosity, augmenting in-group cooperation by shared beliefs in relevant agents and traditions. So, has Darwin been right in everything he wrote about the evolution of religiosity and religions? Certainly not. One of his hypotheses strongly contested is the assumption that the effect of augmented human cooperation would pay out on the group level. Darwin, citation, "It must not be forgotten that although a high standard of morality gives but a slight or no advantage to each individual man and his children over the other men of the same tribe, yet that advancement in the standard of morality and an increase in the number of well-endowed men will certainly give an immense advantage to one tribe over another." End of citation. This Darwinian assumption was later branded group selection, and it fell into disgrace among evolutionary biologists for some decades. It is a very fascinating coincidence that the re-emergence of debates concerning multi-level selection concentrated on the evolution of religion, most notably between Richard Dawkins and David Sloan Wilson. Although the case is not yet closed, the empirical findings from the field of evolutionary studies of religion seem to increasingly support multi-level perspectives, especially concerning processes of biocultural evolution. Maybe Darwin was right even in this aspect. But then, the Victorian scholar seems to have been largely wrong on another subject. His assumption that religiosity was an all-male trait. He only discussed male believers, and he assumed that it helped primarily in intertribal warfare. Although this way of imagining fierce groups of men-of-war protecting their submissive women is still a hit in popular culture, respective evolutionary hypotheses are facing empirical problems. Although religious communities are able to form fierce battle groups, many religious and pacifist traditions, such as the Old Order Amish, the Hutterites, or some Orthodox Jews, managed to flourish throughout the centuries. Their way of spreading has not been conquest, but high fertility. Here, Darwin's colleague Antoinette Brown Blackwell and today's Sarah Blaffer-Hirdy seem to have gotten it right. Human prosociality potentials, including religiosity, evolved primarily through cooperative breeding. In a lecture given by Friedrich August von Hayek in 1982, and in the final chapter of his final book in 1988, the evolutionary economist and Nobel laureate noticed that the first commandment given by God to the freshly created human pair is to be fruitful and multiply. And he noted that this myth could be one of the many functional nurturing human life and culture because it reached beyond rational, scientific, and immanent arguments. Today's demographic data suggests religious lore is even more adaptive than he or Darwin could have imagined. As one of many examples, Dominic Enstedt tested the correlation of worship attendance and their average number of children with data from Ways of the World Value surveys spanning 82 countries from all continents and world religions. The result was crystal clear. The devout tended to have far more children among Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, and other religions. Religiously affiliated humans reproduce on average more successfully than their secular peers. It turned out that there have been numerous variants of non-reproductive traditions, such as the Christian Shakers, but that only those survived to grow into world religions that endorsed marriage and large families. Of course, this doesn't mean that religion is the only demographic factor, but that it is an independent one. Finally, the findings do help to understand why evolutionary scientists have not been able to defeat their fundamentalist adversaries. While non-religious evolutionists tend to bring up far more scientific arguments, religious creationists tend to bring up far more children. It's a surprising stalemate with a deep and informative evolutionary irony. In exploring the reproductive outcomes of diverse human populations, communities, and traditions, we found a lot of religious variants that managed to retain high levels of fertility throughout many generations. But in contrast, we still did not find even a single example of any non-religious human group, past or present, that retained at least a replacement level of 2 children per woman for just a century. Religiosity is not only adaptive by raising the average evolutionary fitness of believers. Religious traditions might even be necessary for the persistence of human populations. Correspondingly, Darwin underestimated the role of women in the evolution of human traits such as religiosity. And this happened although one of his main sources, David Hume and his Natural History of Religion, cited the classic Greek historian Strabo in asserting a foundational role of women. Citation: "For all agree in regarding the women as the chief founders of religion, and it is the women who provoke the man to the more attentive worship of the gods, to festivals, and to supplications, and it is a rare thing for a man who lives by himself to be found addicted to these things." End of citation. Although the studies and debates in this field are rather new, the empirical evidence seems to favor Strabo and Hume over Darwin. Women report on average higher levels of religiosity as well as higher percentages of religious affiliation and volunteering, successfully securing their cooperative and reproductive interests. I would like to end this lecture with a last and very controversial theory formulated by Charles Darwin, those of evolutionary progress in the history of humanity. He wrote, citation, "It is apparently a truer and more cheerful view that progress has been much more general than retrogression, that man has risen, though by slow and interrupted steps, from a lowly condition to the highest standard as yet attained by him in knowledge, morals, and religion." End of citation. Most of the colleagues from the natural sciences I had the joy to work with agreed to a progress in scientific knowledge. Some acknowledged a kind of slow and interrupted moral progress in matters such as human rights and emerging democracies. But few, if any, would have accepted Darwin's idea that religion would progress too, toward an enlightened monotheism. Has Darwin been wrong? Or are we? I hope to have shown that evolution is indeed more than biology, and that interdisciplinary studies are opening up new, captivating, and very relevant realms for shared scientific exploration and debate. Thank you very much.